In this lesson, you are going to learn observing, describing, and naming emotions. Why we should observe and describe emotions, the steps to observing and describing emotions, factors that interfere with describing emotions, and changing emotional responses. We will also learn to check the facts. Why we should check the facts, and examples of emotions that fit the facts. So why observe and describe emotions? Learning to observe, describe, and name emotions can help with emotion regulation. Research shows that in processing an emotional experience, it is more effective to be very specific about the emotion and emotional event than to try to regulate the emotion in overly general or non-specific ways. For example, anxiety is reduced by observing and describing the specific fear-producing cues in contrast to general impressions regarding cues prompting fear and anxiety. You also observe and describe to learn to be separate from your emotions. By learning to observe your emotions, you learn to be separate from them and not to be identified with them. In order to control your emotional responses, you must be separate from your emotions so that you can think and use coping strategies. You also observe and describe emotions to learn to be at one with emotions. You need to be one with your emotions in the sense that you identify them as part of yourself and something outside of yourself. This is like a rider being one with their horse. You can't control the horse. If you are separate and fighting the horse will fight back. The rider then cannot control the horse smoothly. If the rider has no identity separate from the horse will assume all control. There are steps to observing and describing emotions. Steps include prompting events, interpretation of prompting events, biological changes and experiences, expression and actions, after effects of emotions, and naming emotions. For each specific emotion, there are typical prompting events that set off the emotion. Events that occurred right before the emotion started. The story that you have about the events creates vulnerability factors, which are unique to each person. For each specific emotion, there are typical interpretations, thoughts, and assumptions about the events that prompt the emotion. For each specific emotion, there are typical biological changes and experiences. These include feelings, body sensations, and action urges. Focus here on body changes that you sense or that can sense if you pay attention. Changes and experiences are similar across some emotions and very different for others. Expressions and actions are typical facial expressions and body language, verbal communication, and actions associated with specific emotions. Remember that a primary function of emotions is to elicit actions to solve specific problems. You need to attend to the actions associated with each emotion. There are after effects of what happened in your mind, your body, and your emotions just after your first emotions started. Naming emotions is essential to observing and describing them. Factors that interfere with observing and describing emotions include secondary emotions, which are the emotional reactions to emotions, and ambivalence, which is more than one emotional reaction to the same event. When a secondary emotion occurs, it can cover up and confuse the primary emotional reaction. Sometimes the only way to sort this out is to pay significant attention to the prompting event and the interpretations of the prompting event. What emotions would most people have following that emotion? If you are not afraid, guilty, or ashamed of your own emotions, what emotion would you have experienced after that prompting event? Is there any emotional response you were probably avoiding? People often experience two or more emotions at almost exactly the same moment. This can confuse the situation. An example would be, you might love your parents and at the same time be furious with them and want to get as far away from them as possible. When you start at a new school, you might be excited and a little afraid at the same time. To change unwanted emotions, we must first check the facts. Sometimes that's all we need. When the emotion does not fit the facts, you need to practice acting opposite to your emotion. When the emotion fits the facts and the situation is a problem you need to solve, you need to practice problem solving. Checking the facts requires changing beliefs and assumptions about a situation to fit the facts. This can help you change your emotional reaction. Checking the facts is a basic strategy in cognitive therapy, as well as many other forms of therapy. If emotions do not fit the facts, and knowing the facts does not change your emotion, then acting opposite to your emotions all the way, repeatedly, will change your emotional reaction. Keep on keeping on. When your emotions fit the facts of the situation and you want to change your emotions, problem solving is needed. Solving problems will reduce the frequency of negative emotions. Knowing what is needed to change emotional responses can be very difficult. It requires effort, willingness, and the ability to determine what is your own best interest. Yes, but is a typical response to efforts to help a person change emotions, particularly when emotional intensity is high and changing emotions is experienced as admitting the person's feelings are invalid. Yes, but does not lead to feeling better or to solve emotional problems. When you want to say yes, but, it can be useful to remind yourself that there are only 4 possible responses to solving a problem. First, you can solve the problem by changing the situation or by leaving the situation. Second, you can change your emotional reaction to the situation so that painful emotions are reduced, even though the problem remains. Third, you can radically accept the situation. That is, acknowledging the situation can't be helped and you can't change how you feel either. Completely and willingly accepting this state of affairs can give you a sense of freedom and reduce your suffering. Fourth, you can stay miserable or make things worse. Let's go a little deeper into checking the facts. We often react to our thoughts and interpretations of an event rather than to the facts of the event. Changing your beliefs, assumptions, and interpretations of events to fit the facts can change your emotional reactions. So, why check the facts? Thoughts and interpretations of situations and events instead of the facts can set off painful emotions. Beliefs about reality can cause powerful emotions. A person who believes that someone is trying to hurt them may feel very afraid, even if the facts are completely different and the other person is trying to help, not hurt. Faulty beliefs about what you think you need can lead to emotional misery. I must be in control instead of I like being in control better than being out of control. Faulty beliefs about events can cause new problems. I have enough gas in the car to get where I'm going when the fuel gauge says empty. Thinking in absolutes can set off extreme emotions. This means extreme thinking, black and white thinking, all or nothing thinking, and either or thinking. If I don't get an A in this course, I am a failure, instead of I may want an A, but less than an A is not a failure. Your emotions can affect what you think about events and how you react to your thoughts. Your mood, for example, can influence ideas, memories, perceptions, and interpretations of important events, particularly events that are complex or ambiguous. The very same information can take on very different meanings, depending on your current emotional state. When you are in a happy mood, even a Debbie Downer friend can seem like a great person to get together with. Believing that your thoughts are absolute truth can be a recipe for disaster. It's important to remember that no one knows the absolute truth. Believing that you do ordinarily leads to conflict. Different opinions on the facts can be valid, even if you don't agree with them. There is always more than one way to see a situation and more than one way to solve a problem. Two things can seem like opposites, but both can be true. Knowing the facts is essential for solving problems. If you don't know the facts or you have faulty beliefs about them, it can interfere with problem solving. Believing that my roof isn't leaking when it is leaking means that I will not get the roof fixed. Examining your thoughts and checking the facts can change your emotions. The correct facts can change your emotions. Knowing the actual facts of the situation can help you problem solve. Knowing the facts can help you change what you believe to be the facts. So, how do you check the facts? Ask, what is the emotion I want to change? It's much harder to change an emotion when you don't know what emotion or set of emotions you are actually feeling. Facts about a situation might fit one emotion but not another. Pay careful attention to current thoughts, physical sensations, posture, urges to act, actions, and verbal statements when you're reviewing ways to describe emotions. Ask what event prompted my emotion. Describe the facts observed through the senses. just the facts. Challenge judgments, extremes, and absolutes, and black and white descriptions. A more balanced view of the facts may change your emotions. Prompting events can be an event outside of you or an internal event, such as a previous emotion, a series of thoughts, or an ability or inability to do a task. A prompting event can be a secondary reaction to a previous emotion. An example would be anger at yourself for feeling afraid. A prompting event can be a secondary reaction to a thought. An example would be feeling guilty at judgmental thoughts about another person. A prompting event can also be a secondary reaction to lack of ability. An example would be feeling ashamed at your inability to remember someone's name. Your emotions can also be elicited by your own actions. An example would be joy at playing well in a baseball game. One problem in figuring out your emotions is that you often describe situations and your own emotions, thoughts, and actions in judgmental language, with absolutes and black and white statements. This is not an effective way to describe an event because it evokes strong negative emotional reactions to mental descriptions of the event rather than the event itself or the actual prompting event. What are my interpretations, thoughts, and assumptions about the event? You often add what you observe and then react to what you have added rather than what you observed. You jump to conclusions and then act on your conclusions. Listening to a person express disappointment in something you do, which is a fact, and thinking that the person is trying to control you, an interpretation, could elicit anger. Disgust could be elicited by seeing a man looking in your window from the street, a fact, and thinking he is a sexual predator, an interpretation. Sadness might be elicited if you find out a person made plans without you, a fact, and decided that the person does not love you, an interpretation. Consider all the other possible interpretations. Other reasonable interpretations can be an effective way to regulate your emotions. Practice looking at all sides of the situation and all the various points of view. Ask, am I assuming a threat? Ask yourself whether you are imagining a threatening event or outcome. Painful emotions are almost always related to some type of threat. What negative outcomes might you anticipate from the event? Often, you are not even aware that you are assuming some sort of threat. The threat is implicit in your mind. Search for the threat you're associating with the prompting event, especially when you have checked all the facts and are still having very intense emotions. This is a clue that your current emotion may be a secondary emotion. If that's the case, you need to figure out what implicit or nonverbal threat you are actually reacting to. Label the threat. This involves labeling the emotion. Fear is encountering danger to life, health, or well-being. Shame is being kicked out of community. Jealousy is someone else taking away a valued person or thing. Evaluate the chances that the threatening event will really occur. It is important to be in wise mind when you consider the likelihood that a threatening event will occur. Often, what seems threatening at first glance is not so threatening once you think about it more clearly. You're thinking you are going to get robbed when you see two men walking towards you on the street at night. You evaluate the chances that that threatening event will really occur by observing if there are other people around, if the men are carrying weapons, and so on. Consider what was the outcome previous times you had a similar thought. You have a stomach ache. Maybe you have a disease. You remind yourself how many times you've had a stomach ache in the past. And in those past situations, it was not serious and it went away. Ask questions to get more information. Check and review the known facts of the situation. When a friend walks by you at school without saying hi, you think she doesn't like you. You seek information. You ask her whether she saw you in the hall. Observe the problem situation after calming yourself down so you can see it clearly. When your daughter says she crashed your car, you might think, my car is destroyed. Why don't you check on your car? Perform experiments in the real world to see if your predictions come true. How factual are your worries and predictions about events? Do you think you can't get into college? Conduct an experiment. Apply for schools you qualify for and see what happens. Think of other possible outcomes. The simple act of generating alternative outcomes can itself increase your belief that other outcomes are possible. Your mother asks to talk to you. You think you're in trouble. You generate alternative outcomes. Your mom wants to plan a date with you. Your mom wants to congratulate you for getting good grades. Your mom wants to ask you to take care of your younger brother. Ask, what's the catastrophe? Did the threatening event actually occur? If the worst outcome does occur, what are the realistic consequences? Sometimes the facts are just as bad as you think they are. However, often you make a bad situation even worse when you catastrophize the facts. Catastrophizing is exaggerating the negative characteristics of the facts and focusing on the worst possible outcomes. You're going to die because this happened. Panic induced by the thought, I'm dying, can constrict blood vessels and actually increase the probability of having a heart attack. Catastrophizing can increase both physical pain and emotional pain. Imagine coping well with catastrophes. You can problem solve, cope ahead, or practice radical acceptance. Ask, does my emotion and/or its intensity fit the facts? Emotions evolved as a way for individuals to respond effectively to common problems. A common situation is likely to elicit one of the basic emotions. When such situations occur, the corresponding emotion is likely to be useful in the situation. It likely fits the facts. You were laid off from your job and reacted as if you will never work again. That emotion and its intensity do not fit the facts. It can be really difficult for intensely emotional people to see through irrational, non-factual descriptions, faulty interpretations, unrealistic worries, and catastrophic versions of the facts. It's important to remember that emotions love themselves. The after effects of emotions include narrowing of attention and increased sensitivity to threat, which can make it very difficult to change thoughts and images. Middle of the night thinking is the type of thinking that occurs when you wake up in the middle of the night with worries and you catastrophize your thoughts about your life. When you wake up in the morning, you often wonder how you could worry so much and believe this catastrophic kind of thinking in the middle of the night. It can be helpful simply to say to yourself, these are middle of the night thoughts. I am going to ignore them until morning when things will be clearer. Here are some examples of emotions that fit the facts. Fear functions to keep you safe by urging you to escape danger through avoiding, running away, or hiding from anything that threatens you. Anger functions to protect you from assault or loss of important people, things, or goals by urging you to threaten and attack those who might hurt you. Disgust functions to keep contamination away from you and urges you to get rid of or away from whatever you find disgusting. Envy functions to motivate you to work hard to obtain what others have in order to improve your life and those of people important to you. It mobilizes you to try to reduce what others have when they have a lot more than you do in order to equalize the distribution of resources. Envy can be thought of as the emotion that redistributes wealth and power. Envy is often corrosive of the mind and spirit and does little good. Bitterness does little good and can be ineffective. Research suggests that happiness is not determined by the absolute value of an event or personal situation, but its value in relation to other events or situations, both interpersonally among those in the environment and intrapersonally compared to the experience in the past. When others have more than you do, not only does this generate envy, it can also add cheer and happiness. Jealousy is justified when someone is threatening to take away relationships or things that are very important to you. Jealousy is the emotion that ensures you do everything possible to protect these relationships or things. You often do this by trying to control the actions of people you want close to you or by refusing to share what you have with others. It's tough to tell when a relationship is threatened and when it is not threatened. Checking the facts can itself be a form of jealous behavior. The important question is to ask, is it effective to act jealously? Love functions to motivate you to find, be with, and attach yourself to other people and things. It is justified when those you love enhance your survival and well-being. You can argue that everyone and everything is lovable. Love would therefore always be justified by the facts. You can also argue that sometimes you love the wrong people or the wrong things. This is the case when you love a person who doesn't love you or care for you, and when the person you love actively harms you. This can happen in abusive relationships, friendships with people who require codependence on addictive behaviors, or groups that threaten to leave you if you improve your life more than they do or they want to. Sadness functions to pull you into yourself so you can figure out what is really important to you and what to do when you have lost important things. Sadness signals to others that help is needed. Shame has two important functions. First, shame hides behaviors that would elicit rejection from others and lead to you being rejected from the community. Second, if your behavior somehow becomes public, shame prompts you to grovel and appease those you have offended so that you will not be rejected. Shame is a community-based emotion. It is easy to conclude that if behaviors or personal characteristics are not immoral or wrong, shame is not justified. This is not the case. Shame's evolutionary advantage is that if behavior sanctioned by one's community elicits shame, shaming expression and actions can keep you in the community. However, staying in a community that elicits shame may not be beneficial. Shame is not completely useless. It could have made a difference between life and death in earlier times, and even so, now in some cultures or groups. Finally, guilt. Guilt functions by urging you to repair behaviors that violate your moral values and to prevent future violations.